Hi guys, so today's video I'm going to be using a pretty deck called the Old Style Lenormand. Just did a review on this one. It's by US Games, and this is based on a question that was on my YouTube channel by a very observant viewer named Sharon Rose. So Sharon, this is dedicated to you. Sharon had a great question, and it was in regard to the mice card. She says, I've noticed on different decks there's sometimes one mouse, there's two. Does it ever indicate any meaning that indicates kind of a collective or multiple of something? And I really like this question. So this particular deck, you can see there are two mice, and the mice card actually, when everything goes back to the original Philippe Lenormand document, something that Lenormand readers should all be familiar with. And this document was with the original deck, and it was actually called the mouse card. And the mouse is interpreted according to that. It was a game, and it was whether it was near or far to the significator. So something was stolen or thieved or taken away, lost. And depending on how near or far it was to the significator was whether it would ever be retrieved again. I'm going to talk more about the near-far method compared to what you may see me doing many times, and so you can kind of know how they overlap and how they may need to have separation other times. But let's talk about this particular card. So because it had to do with thievery, it really did not have to do with multiples of anything, and because it was called the mouse card, it does not have any meaning regarding multiples of anything. But I do want to go through the deck to talk about a few cards that do mean more of something, more than one of something. For example, one you may see me talk about is the stars card, and I love to see multiple stars in the sky with this particular card because it does means multiples, spreading out. This is how we get the networking meaning, something that's kind of like spread and seen for all. It can have to do with something that metastasizes, as even can be freckles on the face, many of something. So this is a card that does indicate multiples of something. So the stars card is something you want to see. It's different than the tarot star, which is that single star in the sky. I wanted to talk about the Clover card because every once in a while I do see people show this meaning too, because it is the number 2 Lenormand card. And while you want to pay very close attention to those numbers if you're asking questions about numbers, I really can't think of a time when I ever really asked like how many of something would be there or whatever. So I don't know how often this would come up for you, but I've never really needed to use that meaning for this particular card. But feasibly, it could be the number 2 has some significance here, like any of the other cards in the deck, and I have seen it used that way. Personally, I tend not to go there. So I guess you can leave that to your own discretion whether you want to do that or not for the number 2. I have other cards that are more readily available for that. You will see that around though. So we can talk about the broom and whip card, because this has to do with something that's over and over. So if you ask about, how many times do I have to do this, just means repeatedly, over and over and over, multiple times, multiple events. It's just a repetition. This is a card about repetition, repetitious acts, things that are repeated. So that is something that could feasibly mean multiples. Another one is the birds card, and the birds card used to have 2 little owls on it, and I really like that version of it because I think it's like two married, like a married old couple or 2 old friends, who kind of hang out and talk together. Like, did you think of the phrase 2 old birds? That'd be me someday. And so sometimes this can mean a couple, but you think of birds, it's also about meetings and small gatherings of people. So when you think of the birds card, I want you to think of small groups of people that have to do with little meetings, little tiny groups, as opposed to this, which has to do with more. So if you have the garden has to do with larger groups of meetings. So more people, more at the event. It could be like a event, a gathering, a conference, so multiples of people present at something like this when you see the garden. So this is bigger than the birds. Birds is little meetings, maybe in a room, 4 or 5, maybe 6 people. And this has to do with more like very large gatherings, rallies, that sort of thing. This one is a little different. So if you look at the lilies card, it's not multiples of anything, even if you see more than one flower, like the bouquet. It's not really multiples. But this has to do with an extension of time. So if you're asking specifically about time and when something will happen, this can indicate a long gestation, so many months or even many years. So it kind of has to like accrue in value or time. So when you see the lilies, although it's not multiples of anything, it can be extended period of time. Okay, so that's another one that could kind of drag things out. Then there is the crossroad or the path, and you'll notice it splits. So this can indicate like two of something by way of something splitting or becoming more than one. It can mean doubling of something. And so this is a card that for me does indicate some kind of like a pairing sometimes, but it's also, just think of it more as like splitting, okay? By nature, and I didn't take that card out of the deck, but let's add the scythe because it's weeding out, so that can cut away, but it's almost like that's not multiples, that's more like cutting away, eliminating. So it's kind of the opposite. It's like paring down, okay? So, but this one is splitting or exiting and taking a different road, splitting something in two. So what was one now becomes two, that sort of thing. So this is kind of taking one thing and kind of going into two different directions. All right, so decision, one or the other at the beginning, and at the end it's like an exit ramp where you have to go off. So not so many, but it does indicate maybe like a splitting. Like splitting electrical wires, that sort of thing. And then lastly, we have the fish card, which should be a card that indicates by diagram multiples in it. It's a little hard to see in this, but there are little fish in the background in addition to the big flying fish you see in the front. And so fish cards do mean many of something, multiples. Funny, it doesn't mean going like when you think of a school of fish, multiples of fish, kind of you can think that, but it does not mean following the crowd. It's almost the opposite of that. It can mean like independence, which is strangely enough kind of the opposite of a group, but it can mean like going your own way, being independent. Think of how a fish kind of flops around and the deck when it's caught, I guess. But this is a card when you see something, it's many fish in the sea, an abundance of things. Yeah, there'll be a lot of them. So when you see the fish card, it's not kind of a solitary card. This does kind of indicate to me something that there will be many of multiples. Will I meet a man and you get this card come up, or I meet a woman, it's like, yeah, lots of them. There's like many fish in the sea and there's many out there for you before, this is over. So that sort of thing. So those are the cards in the deck that speak to me in terms of multiples. But the mouse or mice cards, no matter how many you see in there, it's really not so much that indicates multiples of anything, but it is about a theft. And it can be some kind of nervousness, disease, a parasite, that sort of thing, but its meaning does not indicate multiples. So great question, Sharon Rose. Thank you for that. And I hope everybody enjoys reading your cards.